And in this lesson on wayfinding, I'm going to talk about how to use arrows on signage when you're designing signage. Coming straight up after this short break. Hi, I'm Paul Simmons and this is the Wayfinding channel. So today we're talking about how to design arrows on wayfinding signage. And there's quite a lot to think about. You'll be quite surprised how much there is to consider. So let's get started. You might look at signage and not spare too much thought for which way the arrows are facing or how the signs are designed. But when it comes to signage for wayfinding, which means signage that guides us from one place to another, the arrows are probably the most important thing on the sign. This is because the arrows ultimately are what guide us. Let's start off with a good example of how arrows should be used on wayfinding signage. Take a look at this picture that I'm going to show you on screen right now. In this picture you can see that the arrows are facing away from the text. So you should never have arrows pointing into text. This confuses people because as they follow the direction of the arrow, it's facing into text, not into an actual location. So always have arrows pointing away from the text. Also, this sign is very, very good because you can see that the contrast of the colours, the yellow on the black background is very good. So the arrows are very clear and easy to see. Also, you'll notice in the sign that the signage can be read from quite a distance and by quite a lot of people because the signage is quite high and it's big and bold. This is from Catania in Sicily, which is in Italy. Wonderful place, by the way. If you've never been to Sicily, highly recommend it. Anyway, let's talk about arrows again. Take a look at this picture which is coming on screen right now. From this image you can see that there's two arrows pointing upwards and they point into the word Catania. Catania in fact is on the right because you can see to the right of the word Catania there's an arrow pointing to the right. This sign's just really confusing. So if you think about columns on a sign, you should have the arrows in a column, text in a column, but not pointing into each other. And here the problem is slightly different. People trying to get to gates 40 to 68 keep turning into the toilets. And so the solution here was quite simple, and that was to put the arrow for the gates 40 to 68 and the icon on the right side of the text. By separating them, this very subtle difference, this solved the problem. So sometimes making it easy for people not to get lost is really quite simple. A big problem with arrows on signage is when the arrows are just too small. As mentioned before when I showed that good example, if you have big arrows which are also bold and good contrast on the background, people can find their way much more easily. On this example, which is from a music centre, it's very difficult to read the sign and read the arrows unless you're really close to the sign. Also, again, the arrows are pointing into text. This is being proven to confuse people. It takes longer to digest the information unless the arrow is pointing into the space, into the direction that you're trying to go to. Another consideration is grouping information. Take a look at this photo. It's really good the way that they've grouped the information together which goes in one direction and grouped the other information which points in another direction. So the arrows in this sign can easily be bold and large, and it's really clear from a distance. It's easy to see which way to go. Another consideration that causes a lot of confusion for designers when they're designing wayfinding signage is whether an arrow should be pointed upwards or downwards if somebody has to go straight ahead. There's a simple rule to follow, and this is it. If they're going straight ahead and there's going to be a downward decline quite soon afterwards, such as steps or stairs going downwards, then have the arrow pointing downwards on the sign to go straight ahead and down. If they're going straight ahead and there's no downward decline of any type, then just have the arrow pointing upwards. Keep to the system for upwards and downwards arrows. As you can see on this picture that I'm putting on screen now, it's quite confusing that gates 40 to 68 have a sign pointing upwards because you have to go straight ahead, but then the emergency sign is pointing downwards. Actually, there's no downward decline, so this is really a conflict of arrows and one of the problems that I see with signage. Make sure also to have the arrow on the right side of the sign. If the arrow is pointing away from text, this is not going to be a problem because the arrow is going to be on the left side of the sign pointing to a location on the left, or it's going to be on the right side of the sign pointing to somewhere on the right. In this example that you're seeing on screen now, The owl should actually be on the left side of the sign for the disabled unisex facility, because the owl at the moment is quite confusing because it's on the right side but it's pointing to something on the left. This is just bad design. So the owl in this case should be on the left. Also, always use this sequence for signage that is used for wayfinding. So from the middle of the sign you have the text, then you have a logo, and then you have the arrow, whichever way you're pointing to. So when I say a logo or an image, it's usually like, for example, a picture of a bag, if it's for the baggage or luggage area, or a picture of an aeroplane if it's for departures. So text, icon, arrow, whichever way you're pointing out of the sign. And another point is to try and avoid designing just for being creative for the sake of it. With wayfinding, it's quite different in some respects to other forms of design, because you don't want to design things just so that you can show off your artistic skills. And you can see this example from a museum. And I find that museums and art galleries and such locations are some of the worst for wayfinding signage. In this sign, you can see that there's a red arrow. Well, you can see it if you look really carefully. You can see a red arrow on an orange background in the middle of the letter B. This really isn't good signage. And actually the basement level is actually, from what I understand, is actually one level lower. So it looks like this is saying this is the basement level, but the arrow is pointing downstairs. In fact, I'm not even sure which floor this is. It's quite confusing. I thought I'd seen it all in wayfinding, but recently I saw arrows on signs without any tails, an arrow without a tail. Okay, that's being creative, but in wayfinding it's about making it simple. People need to understand and be able to find a way easily, not to be confused by an arrow that doesn't really look like an arrow. If you're going to use arrows on signage, you might want to think about also making it clear what the arrow is pointing to. Take a look at this example, which I'm showing you just on screen right now. I still have no idea where this arrow was pointing to. It's a mystery. I don't know, but so just provide the right information, provide text with the arrow, make it clear. Very, very simple. Having said that though, I've seen arrows without text, without any clear direction used, and it was very creative. This is in Norway, and there was an arrow pointing into this house, and I didn't know why, but it was clear that somebody wanted us to go into that house. So my wife and I, we chose to follow the arrow. And what it did, it took us into this lady's basement, and she was using it as an art gallery to sell pictures to tourists. So this was really a very creative way to use arrows, but I wouldn't do it this way in a large location, such as if you're in charge of planning the system for the wayfinding system for an airport or a shopping mall. This is okay if you're just an individual with trying to sell a few pictures, but curiosity in this case did get the better of us. So let's just recap on the things that we've considered on using arrows on signage for wayfinding. Make sure that the arrows look like arrows, that they have an arrow head and they have a tail. Make sure that there's a good contrast of the colours between the background and the foreground and background, so that you can see the arrow easily. Make sure that the arrow is large enough so that it can be seen from a distance, and that will also apply to text. It should be large enough, but I'll discuss that in another forthcoming video. Make sure that it's clear where the arrows are pointing to, such as by having text that accompanies the arrow, and have an icon, because if somebody doesn't understand the language, they speak a different language, they're not going to understand it. This is why the icons, by the way, is very important. Question of the day, and I would love to get your comments down below, and I'm not worried about whether you agree with me or disagree with me. I would just love to build a conversation below, and with this wayfinding community it'd be great to get some feedback and ideas, and for us to bounce ideas around with each other. So please put your comments below. The question of the day that I have is, what are your ideas for how owls should be used in the design of wayfinding signage? Whatever you think, please comment below. Also, once again, please subscribe to this channel. It would be great to build up a bit of a following, to build some kind of wayfinding community. Well, thank you for watching this video. Thank you. Bye.